Hey there everyone, this is Samuel Johnson and welcome back to the Alien Force Retrospectives. And today we're going to be looking at episode 33 of Ben 10 Alien Force, Singlehanded. And admittedly, I was actually really looking forward to this episode because when I was younger and I watched this, I remember it being one of my favorites. And after watching it after all this time, it's still kind of amusing. What's going on is that the bad guy this episode is a guy named Sunder, who's this or Sunder the Collector, as they call him. Essentially, he is a black market dealer who hunts rare and valuable objects and then sells them on the black market. And in this case, he's after the Omnitrix, which, considering the other villains in this show and what they usually do want, it's actually kind of amusing to go back to the tried and true. They just want the Omnitrix kind of motivation. And Vilgax doesn't count since he was a long-time villain. It's just kind of amusing. Sorry, a little hair right there. Excuse me. Just had a soda. Anyway, though, so he's come to Earth. He's chasing Ben around. Ben is able to outmaneuver him a bit, but just before he can get hold of the big guns, the Omnitrix times out. So Ben ends up. So it's just Ben and Sunder. So Ben. So Sunder carries his axe around with an energy blade. And so Ben says, "Well, good luck getting this thing off my wrist." And Sunder says, "I'll worry about that later." And so he starts, and then he just slams the axe at Ben, but he manages to block it with his arm. And suddenly, just when it hits, and suddenly there's a giant flash of light, and Ben vanishes. Next thing you know, we see where Ben wound up. It turns out that somehow that the blast from Sunder's axe sent Ben into the null void, and on top of that, his hand is gone. Like, it's not chopped off, mind you. Kind of. What's going on is that Ben has gotten sent to the null void while his hand is still on Earth via a dimensional dimensional displacement. Ben is still technically attached to his arm. It's just in another dimension. I mean his hand. But yeah. Which Ben, like even Ben says, he can still feel it. It's just that he's not in the same. They're both in two separate universes. As such, back in Bellwood, Sunder has Ben's hand and is flying away with it, but somehow Ben's hand pulls a cousin thing on us as it manages to get away from Sunder and tries running off to get help. At first it tries to go into Julie, but the dog gets it before it can get close, and this dog is running around. Two kids happen to see the dog, and well, they manage, and after wrestling to get Ben's hand away from it, which I think Ben should feel at least a dog biting into his hand, because I had a dog bite me before. It hurts a lot, but pretty much what happened. But they managed to get the hand away from him, and actually something that I kind of like is the fact that when they see the Omnitrix, they react to it the same way Ben reacted to it in the original series. Like, what the heck is this? And they start messing with it, and they manage to activate it. And this is where we actually see one of the gimmicks of this episode. As I said before, Ben is still technically attached to his hand. It's just they're both on two separate planes of existence. As such, while the kids are messing with the Omnitrix in one plane of existence, Ben is back in the null void. Ben is running for his life. When he first arrived, he was attacked by an alien, and we see more of the Tennyson trademark creativity as he manages to outmaneuver it and manages to knock it aside, and manages to knock it out via a rock. And even at one point, and when we come back to him, he's being chased by some blue wild mutts. Well, he actually does call them Volpomancers here, but whatever. They're still wild. They're still the same thing as wild mutt. And he manages to get into like a swamp or bog, thinking mask is sent, but as his hand continues being jerked around, he accidentally splashes in water, getting their attention again. But just as the kids start messing with the Omnitrix, they wind up transforming him into Big Chill, which, because the Omnitrix is on Ben's chest when he transforms, it gives him access to it again. So he's able to fend off the Volpomancers, and after he gets rid of them, he goes Jet Ray and flies off. But unfortunately, at that moment, Ben's hand winds up with Julie, as while the kids had it, Ben went swamp fire, shot some fire, and it caused fire to spew out of his hand, scaring them off. personally, though. I think if kids had their own flamethrower, they'd probably abuse it, but whatever. So when the hand catches up to Julie, because since it's still in the form of a jet ray, so she knocks it aside, transforming it back into Ben's hand and transforming Ben back to normal. And Ben manages to get ahead. Ben is ultimately saved by a Null Guardian, but his ultimate goal at this point is to think, well, since I'm stuck in the Null Void, I need to find another way out. So he's trying to make his way to Max's old shelter back when he was the Wrench, hoping that maybe Max left some tech he could probably use to get home. In the meantime, though, when Julie sees the hand, she realizes that when she sees it turn back into Ben's hand, complete with the Omnitrix, she realizes something's not right. So she brings the hand to Kevin and Gwen, and Kevin has a laugh at it, but he explains that, well, and of course, while Gwen and Julie are worried for Ben, Kevin explains that what's really going on is that Ben's fine. He's just in another dimension. The glow on his hand indicates that indicates the dimensional displacement. He says he could easily create a machine that can bring Ben back. In the meantime, though, Sunder has managed to track them down because he actually does have a means of tracking the Omnitrix. He has this little tracker that whenever the Omnitrix is there, he can find out where it is. And so since the Omnitrix is at Kevin's garage, they managed to go there. And so they realize they need to fend Sunder off. So Gwen and Kevin are able to fend him off too, but Julie needs a weapon. And so, well, since she has Ben's hand, she decides that she's going to use the Omnitrix. So she starts messing with it and manages to turn Ben's hand into Diamond Head so she can fend off Sunder, while in the meantime Ben has finally reached Max's old hideout, and after some problems with Diamond Head and the fact that Julie's using some of his powers, and almost falling off a bridge because of it, he manages to get inside, but unfortunately the place is ransacked. Any tech that's still there is destroyed because the entire place is infected with Havoc Beasts, those little annoying things from the Truth episode. It's a little annoying thing that Ben fought in Truth, the one that Phil released into the hotel. But anyway, in the meantime, though, they managed to get some. Meantime, though, as Ben is turned back to normal, so Sunder so Gwen and Julie just keep playing a game of keep away from Sunder, but eventually he gets tired of this and threatens Julie and holds Julie up and says, "If you don't give me the Omnitrix, I'm gonna cut her." So Gwen's about to hand the Omnitrix over, but Kevin, it turns out, has finished his device, and he blasts the Omnitrix and manages to bring Ben back. So at first it looks like that things are turning the tide. Ben's going to go alien to fight him. Only it turns out while Kevin brought Ben back, he didn't fix everything. All he really did was switch Ben and his hand around. So now Ben is back in Bellwood while his hand is in the Null Void. And as such, they realize they need to find a way to distract Sunder, because at the moment they gotta find a way to reverse this. And Kevin says that the best way they can do that is to reverse the polarity of whatever caused Ben to be trapped in the first place. And they theorize that, and Kevin says that it was probably energy from the axe plus the Omnitrix that messed with Ben up. As such, they need the axe in order to put everything back. Unfortunately, they know that Sunder won't have it handed over easily, so Kevin tries to tell him that the Omnitrix is just gone, then maybe he can sell him an antimatter cannon. And Gwen, of course, tries to get the axe off of Sunder, but the thing is, the Havoc Beasts are just as curious about the Omnitrix as the kids were. Once they see Ben's hand, they grab at it, start messing with the controls, and they wind up turning Ben into Brainstorm. And again, since the Omnitrix winds up on his chest when he transforms, the instant Ben's turned to Brainstorm, Sunder's scanner goes off and he realizes that he's being had. As such, they get into another fight, except this time Ben manages to get an upper hand on him as he shocks him, goes Humongousaur to fight him off, and then finally goes Echo as he and Gwen manage to knock him out, and they get his axe away from him. So they manage to use Kevin's device on Ben's hand, and Gwen does, because Kevin chickens out. Gwen gets the axe ready, and Sunder wakes up. He tries rushing at them, but they manage to slash the axe down just at where Ben's arm is while the device is going off. It causes an explosion of energy that sucks Sunder and the axe in, and once it all goes down, Ben's hand is back where it belongs. And so, the episode ends with Sunder back at the Plumber hideout as one of the bigger Havoc Beasts has access to his axe, and he's pretty much, and I guess their equivalent of a death match. So. Yeah, this episode's silly. It's just silly. With the whole idea of Ben's hand being located in another universe while Ben being sent to another universe while his hands are running off doing other things. It's actually pretty amusing. It's stupid, but it's amusing just to see. And something that I like about the episode, originally when I first saw this episode, I saw the premise, I thought, oh, that means that I bet Ben's barely going to go alien then, because he's not going to have access to the Omnitrix. I was thankfully proven wrong with that, because Ben still goes alien, as while he's no longer attached to his hand, the Omnitrix is still on his wrist, and he can still feel it, meaning that all someone needs to do is just mess with the Omnitrix, and boom, he's no longer defenseless. But thankfully, Ben is not an idiot. Something I always will compliment Ben on in any in at least the classic series and Alien Force is that Ben can take a good thing and make a bad thing and make it work to his advantage. In this case, when you realize, I mentioned before how when he first went to the Null Void and realized he didn't have the Omnitrix, he used his brains and wit to get out of it. He just while he knew he couldn't when he first encountered a more dangerous alien, and he realized I can't fight it off. He realized he needed to outmaneuver it, distract it, and maybe throw a punch or two. But otherwise, it was Ben being smart, and it was actually Ben being smart. Even him remembering that maybe he could use some of Max's tech was him being smart. On top of that, Sunder's an alright villain. I think mostly it just kind of comes to nostalgic pandering for this episode. Well, because, as I said, he just wants the Omnitrix, which I admit it's kind of just a night. It's the most basic of evil plots when it comes to this series, but at the same time, we haven't seen that in a while. So, yeah, I'm okay with it. It's simple, but when it comes to Ben 10, I'm kind of okay with that. Pretty much that's just, and again, pretty much the whole crux of the episode is just Ben and his hand are on separate planes of existence, and Ben is just, and of course we still see some good alien action as we see enough people who are curious enough about the Omnitrix to mess with it, like when Ben first got to mess with it and transform Ben, like when he first got it in the classic series. And I'm okay with that. I like that. We still get some nice alien action. Sunder is, well, like I just said, he's all right, kind of basic for what he is. He appears later on in Ultimate Alien and as a boss in one of the video games, but otherwise he's just kind of the guy. He's just kind of a guy who just wants the Omnitrix so he can sell it. So, yeah, he's really there to get an L emotion. He's not bad as he's entertaining, but otherwise, yeah, just all right, pretty much. Otherwise, I think my complaints of the episode are minor. Like, I mentioned how Ben's hand kind of pulls a cousin thing and moves on its own. They don't explain how it does that, how it has its own free will, especially since Ben is still technically attached to it. So, I don't know. Maybe it's like AI and the Omnitrix, but even then, that's still kind of weird. Especially since we saw that Ben kind of does affect, that Ben still has some control over his hand. Like when he was facing the first alien, he clenches his hands into a fist, and so you see his hand clench into a fist. And when at one point he's actually punching the first alien comes in, he's punching it with this arm. So of course in back with Sunder, you can see the hand actually hitting the glass in response since Ben's hitting something. We see that, but there's no explanation for how the hand can move around on its own, or how it still knows where everything is. There's no explanation for that. It's just kind of weird. But I don't know. But on the whole, though, it's still a silly little episode that I think actually is a good example of, is actually one of the few times that the series actually has done Alien Force has managed to replicate the classic series in the right way. Making an episode that's silly but fun, but silly with weird, but is still fun and still is going nuts with its premise. And still kind of he goes with its premise and actually works with it. So, on the whole, silly episode, but a very entertaining one. So, yeah, that's it. Thank you for watching, and tune in next time as we see the hybrids' one last attempt at taking over the Earth. So, yeah, I'm Samuel Johnson, and I'll see you then. Take care.